1. Not every text deserves a reply in today's world, where communication is instant and continuous. There's often pressure to respond to every message, especially from someone we care about. But that pressure can lead us to ignore something important. Not every message requires or deserves a response, and not every response reflects strength. Sometimes, restraint speaks more clearly when someone consistently treats your attention as if it's guaranteed, as if it's always available, no matter how they behave. It's important to step back and examine that dynamic. Responding out of habit or fear of disconnection is not a sign of emotional strength. It's a sign that you're operating from a place of reaction, not choice. A Stoic approach encourages reflection before action. It teaches us to ask, is this message meaningful? Is this communication balanced? Am I responding because I value this exchange, or because I feel compelled to? If the answer points toward obligation or emotional discomfort, then it's okay to pause. It's okay not to reply. This isn't about being dismissive or unkind. It's about protecting your time, your energy, and your peace of mind. If a person has repeatedly shown inconsistency, disrespect, or low effort in their communication, continuing to respond sends the message that such behavior is acceptable. But when you don't reply, you're quietly expressing a boundary not to punish, but to preserve. It's also important to remember that attention is not endless. You have a limited amount of focus to give each day. That focus should go to your well-being, your personal growth, your work, and the people who uplift you. When you choose not to reply to a message that doesn't reflect mutual respect or care, you're choosing to invest your attention more wisely. A Stoic does not act from impulse. He acts from reason, from clarity, and from a deep understanding that peace is worth more than approval. So when a message comes in from someone who takes your presence for granted, consider this: your silence is not rejection, it's self-respect. Not every text deserves a reply. Sometimes the best response is no response, because it allows you to stay centered, grounded, and in control of your time and emotions. 2. Discipline over desire. There's a natural human urge to respond quickly when someone we care about reaches out. Especially in modern relationships, the desire to feel connected, to be liked, or to maintain momentum can lead us to act immediately. But desire, unchecked, often leads to imbalance. That's where discipline comes in. Discipline is the ability to pause, reflect, and act with intention, not emotion. It's what separates a man who is guided by values from one who is pulled in every direction by his impulses. In the context of communication, discipline means not rushing to reply just because the notification appears. It means not sending a message simply because you feel an emotional pull to keep the connection alive. Desire says, text back now so she doesn't forget about you. Discipline says, wait, focus on what matters most right now. The ancient Stoics often spoke about the importance of mastering one's reactions. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." When you apply this to communication, it means you don't have to be available every moment. You don't have to let desire dictate your schedule or your energy. Responding immediately may feel satisfying in the moment, but it often leads to imbalance. It can create a dynamic where your presence is expected, not appreciated. But when you respond with discipline after thoughtful consideration, after you've finished your priorities, you reinforce a different message: that your time is meaningful and your actions are deliberate. This isn't about withholding or being distant for effect. It's about showing that your life has structure, that you're living with purpose. And from that place, any interaction you choose to engage in becomes more intentional, more valuable both for you and the person. On the other side, desire reacts quickly. Discipline moves wisely. The more you practice choosing discipline over impulse, the more control you gain, not just in relationships, but in all areas of life. So the next time your phone lights up, pause, take a breath, ask yourself, is this the right time for this? If not, continue with what matters. Let your responses reflect self-respect, not urgency. 3. The power of pause in a world that moves quickly and demands instant replies. Choosing to pause becomes an act of strength. We often think that responding immediately is a sign of care, but the truth is silence has value. It creates space for thought, for presence, and for intention. And in relationships, that space can make a lasting difference. When you pause before responding, you're not ignoring someone. You're respecting your time and theirs. You're letting the moment settle. You're allowing the conversation to breathe, rather than rushing to fill every gap with words. This pause isn't about playing hard to get, it's about staying connected to your own rhythm rather than reacting to someone else's. The Stoic philosopher Marcus Aurelius once said, "Time is like a river of passing events, and strong is the man who lets it flow without trying to grasp every wave." In other words, you don't need to meet every moment with reaction. You can step back, observe, decide how you want to engage. And when think of how conversations lose their meaning when they become constant. When every message is followed by another within seconds, there's no anticipation, no reflection. But when you pause naturally, calmly, you give the other person space to wonder, to think, to feel the meaning of your words. That's where the connection deepens. This is especially true in romantic or emotional dynamics. Most people respond on impulse, but when you choose not to, you stand out. You create mystery not through silence for its own sake, but through thoughtful timing. It shows that your mind is occupied with things that matter, that you're not dependent on immediate validation. You might be at work, reading, training, or resting. Instead of breaking your focus to answer a text, you stay present in what you're doing. You answer later, when it aligns with your priorities. This is the essence of Stoic self-governance, choosing your response, rather than reacting to every pull on your attention. The pause teaches others something valuable, that you are living fully, not just communicating constantly. And in that gap, they feel something rare, a sense of your presence, even in your absence. So let the pause do its work. Let it reflect your calm, your clarity, and your discipline. 4. Predictable is forgettable. Consistency is a virtue. In emotional dynamics, predictability in your behavior can sometimes lead to being overlooked. When someone knows exactly how you'll respond, when you'll reply, and how much attention you'll give without variation, it can dull their awareness of your value. Human nature tends to take what's always available for granted. When you respond instantly every time, when your attention is always accessible, it may seem thoughtful on the surface, but over time, it creates familiarity that lacks contrast. And without contrast, even meaningful things begin to feel ordinary. This doesn't mean you should be inconsistent in your values or unreliable in your actions. Stoicism is rooted in dependability and integrity, but emotional availability is, in romantic contexts, it not become a pattern of constant validation. If every message gets an immediate reply, where is the depth? Where is the space for reflection or anticipation? Being slightly less predictable invites curiosity. It encourages others to consider your inner world, to wonder what you're doing, where your focus is, what holds your attention. That curiosity is often what sustains interest and appreciation, not because you're withholding attention, but because you're not living on standby. Stoicism teaches us to detach from the need to be constantly seen or understood. Marcus Aurelius said, "Waste no more time arguing what a good man should be. Be one." You don't need to prove your value through endless availability. Instead, focus on your life, your goals, your values, your peace. When you do, your presence becomes something others feel more deeply, because it's not always assumed. The man who creates space, who responds on his own terms, who isn't always predictable in his timing, he becomes more memorable, not because he's playing a game, but because he lives with intention. His attention has weight because it is not scattered. His silence has meaning because it is not empty. It's grounded in purpose. So don't be predictable in a way that leads to being overlooked. Be present when it matters. Be responsive when it aligns with your values. But leave enough space that your presence is noticed, not just expected. Because in silence and timing, there is influence. 5. Emotional control is strength. A Stoic man doesn't act out of impulse, he acts out of principle. In relationships and communication, this often comes down to managing your emotional responses, especially when you feel ignored, misunderstood, or emotionally triggered. It's easy to send a message out of frustration. It's easy to chase after clarity when someone becomes distant. But what takes real inner strength is the ability to pause, observe, and hold your emotional ground without needing immediate resolution. The core of Stoicism teaches that you can't control how others act, but you can always control how you respond. When someone doesn't reply, withdraws, or becomes inconsistent, emotional reactivity only amplifies your sense of powerlessness. But when you stay calm, centered, and patient, you remain in control of yourself, which is the highest form of power. Epictetus, a key figure in Stoic philosophy, said, "It's not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters." This mindset is especially relevant in relationships. Emotional control doesn't mean suppressing your feelings or pretending you don't care. It means creating enough space between what you feel and how you respond so that your actions reflect your values, not your fears. Texting someone in a moment of emotional discomfort might feel like relief, but it often leads to regret, because instead of acting with clarity, you act to soothe discomfort. The result, you give away your presence too easily, and you show that your emotions lead you, not your wisdom. Emotional control allows you to say more by saying less. It creates distance when needed, not to hurt someone, but to protect your peace. It sends the message, "I'm here, but I won't chase. I care, but I won't abandon myself." This level of restraint builds quiet respect, not just from others, but within yourself. You start trusting your ability to navigate uncertainty without losing your center. So the next time you feel the urge to explain, to reach out, or to react, quickly pause, take a breath. Ask yourself, is this reaction aligned with my strength or with my insecurity? And let that answer guide you, because the one who controls his emotions controls the outcome. 6. She notices the silence in a world where most people communicate constantly. Silence becomes noticeable, and not just noticeable memorable. When you choose not to text her back immediately, not to fill every space with words, or not to explain your every feeling, you're not being distant, you're giving both of you space to reflect. Silence isn't about punishment, it's about presence, a meaningful kind of presence that exists even when you're not speaking. We often underestimate how powerful absence can be, but human attention is wired to notice what's missing. When your messages stop appearing at the same time, when your name doesn't show up on her screen as often, it creates a gap. And in that gap, thoughts begin to form. Not every silence is loud, but the right silence, one that's grounded in self-respect, not manipulation, leaves a lasting impression. It shifts the energy. It invites the other person to notice your value, your rhythm, your boundaries. Marcus Aurelius once said, "If it is not right, do not do it. If it is not true, do not say it." Sometimes, saying nothing at all is the truest thing you can offer. It allows your actions, your calm, and your focus to speak on your behalf. You don't need to chase validation through constant connection. You don't need to remind her you're there. If there was something meaningful, she will feel the change. When your presence softens, she will notice the absence of your calm, your attentiveness, your steady energy. And if she doesn't notice, then your silence brought clarity. Not every person deserves your continued energy, but for those who do, your silence has a way of reminding them what they felt when you were present. This is not a strategy. It's a practice of emotional maturity. You are not withdrawing to provoke, but to preserve. You are not silent to be mysterious, but to be intentional. She may not say it out loud. Pride often keeps people quiet, but deep down, the silence is felt. And in many cases, it's the silence that makes someone realize how much your presence meant. So trust the stillness. Let it do its work. 7. Presence over performance in modern relationships. There's often a subtle pressure to say the right thing, respond the right way, or maintain someone's interest through constant engagement. But what truly creates impact is not performance, it's presence. Presence means being grounded in who you are, not in how you're perceived. It means you don't try to win someone's attention, you simply embody a calm, consistent energy that others feel when they're around you, and even when they're not. A man grounded in Stoicism understands that trying to constantly perform through words, gestures, or attention can easily become a form of overcompensation. You don't need to overextend yourself to prove your worth. In fact, the more effort you spend trying to manage how someone sees you, the more you disconnect from your true self. Performance fades, but presence lingers. When you're silent, she won't remember every clever message or perfect reply you once sent. She'll remember how calm you were, how you didn't chase, how you made her feel safe, even without saying much. That's presence. It leaves an emotional imprint, not because you were always visible, but because you were consistently centered. Seneca said, "A wise man is content with himself." That contentment is what creates presence. You're not seeking attention, and you're not afraid of losing it either. You show up authentically, and you're just as willing to step back without bitterness when space is needed. This doesn't mean becoming cold or detached. It simply means that your attention isn't performative, it's not reactive, it's rooted in self-awareness. When you text with intention, not with the goal of being seen. When you speak with calm, not with the urge to impress. And when you go silent, it's not out of anger, it's out of trust in your own stability. That kind of presence is rare. And because it's rare, it's respected. So forget trying to perform or prove. Just be present, be grounded, be calm in your timing, slow in your reactions, and sincere in your energy. It's not the man who says the most who is remembered. It's the one whose presence said enough. 8. She can't read your silence. When you stop responding or go quiet, something interesting happens. She begins to wonder, not because you're trying to make her think, but because silence creates space for reflection. And in that space, assumptions begin to form. But here's the key. She doesn't know what your silence means. Silence has no clear message attached to it. Unlike words, which often come with explanation or emotion, silence is neutral. It can't be read unless someone projects meaning onto it. And that's exactly what happens. When you stop texting, stop explaining, or simply pause communication, she starts to ask silent questions. Is he upset? Has he moved on? Is he still thinking about me? Why isn't he reacting? This uncertainty shifts the dynamic not through force, but through emotional contrast. You're no longer offering predictability, and because of that, her mind stays engaged. Now, this is not about playing games. The goal is not to confuse or control. It's about valuing your own presence enough to let your absence speak when necessary. When you're no longer constantly available, you give her the opportunity to face the emotional echo of your presence. Marcus Aurelius once wrote, "The best revenge is not to be like your enemy." And in relationships, that translates into this. You don't need to respond just because others expect it. You don't have to explain your silence. You don't owe an emotional performance when your peace is more important than another person's expectations. Let her wonder, not because you want her confused, but because you are no longer seeking to be fully understood in every moment. You understand yourself. That's enough. She can't read your silence, but she will feel it. She will notice the shift in rhythm. She'll remember the consistency you once gave, and the space that now exists in its absence. This isn't about being cold. It's about being composed. You are not withdrawing to hurt her. You are stepping back to protect your clarity. And in doing so, you let your silence carry a quiet message. I'm not here to be predictably, here to be intentional. 9. Detachment commands respect. There's a quiet strength in detachment, not the kind that's cold or indifferent, but the kind that's grounded in self. Detachment doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you stop clinging. It means your peace no longer depends on another person's approval, presence, or response. When you detach, you reclaim your power. And with that power comes a certain kind of respect, not because you're demanding it, but because you no longer need to chase it. In any relationship, people sense when you're overly attached, when your emotional state rises and falls based on their attention. But when you learn to observe instead of react, to listen instead of chase, and to walk away instead of argue, something shifts. Your value becomes evident, not through noise, but through stillness. Epictetus taught, freedom is the only worthy goal in life. It is won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control. Detachment is this in action. You accept what's outside your control, her mood, her words, her silence, and you stop trying to manage or influence them. You focus inward, not outward. This kind of presence feels different. It's not emotionally absent, it's emotionally stable. When you show that you're willing to step back without resentment, to go quiet without needing closure, and to prioritize your own peace without making noise about it, you invite respect without saying a word. She may not say it directly. She might even try to test your silence. But beneath the surface, detachment challenges her to see you differently. You're no longer reacting. You're not playing a role. You've become centered. This doesn't mean you're avoiding connection. It means you refuse to be defined by it. You love freely, but not desperately. You give, but not to be validated. And when things become unclear, you detach not to punish, but to protect your integrity. Real strength is quiet. It doesn't beg. It doesn't demand. It simply exists with or without validation. Asterisk. And that is what commands respect. 10. Let her come to you in a world where speed, reaction, and pursuit are often mistaken for care. The Stoic man does something different. He waits. He holds space. He steps back not out of pride, but out of principle. You don't need to chase anyone to prove your value. True connection doesn't need constant reinforcement. And when you've given someone your presence, your patience, and your sincerity, the next move is not always yours to make. Let her come to you. When you stop reaching out, it's not an act of punishment. It's an act of trust. You're trusting that if the connection is meaningful, it won't fade because you took a step back. And if it does fade, then it was only held together by your effort, not mutual energy. Marcus Aurelius said, "Receive without pride, let go without attachment." This mindset allows you to interact without overinvesting, to care without clinging, and to detach without resentment. When you walk away from constant initiation, you're not closing the door, you're simply leaving it open on your side and seeing who walks through it. If she reaches out, it's not because you forced her hand, it's because she chose to. That's real. That's what gives conversations meaning. That's what gives relationships depth. By not texting first, by not checking in constantly, by holding your silence, you give her a rare opportunity, the chance to feel the absence of your energy, and to take action if it matters to her. And if she doesn't, you don't chase, you don't beg, you don't question your worth. You let her come to you or not. Either way, you remain grounded. Stoicism is not about being passive. It's about knowing when action serves your values, and when inaction protects your peace. Your job is not to prove your importance, it's to embody it, quietly, consistently. So let her come to you not out of pride, but out of self-respect. And if she doesn't, let that be a lesson in clarity, not a wound to your ego. A man who waits from a place of strength doesn't lose time. He gains perspective. 11. She notices the shift when you no longer reach out first. She doesn't realize it. Your silence doesn't immediately echo, but slowly, she notices the shift, not in your words, but in your absence. You used to be the one, always there. The first message, the steady check in. Now, there's only space, and that space speaks volumes. It's not bitterness, it's balance. You stopped trying to be remembered by force, and ironically, that's when she starts to remember you. The quiet becomes your presence, the distance becomes your message, the silence becomes your value. You no longer seek attention, you embody self-respect. And in that energy, she begins to question her own silence. Why isn't he texting? Why do I feel this now? She notices, but now, you are no longer watching her reaction. You're watching your peace return. 12. The calm you carry speaks louder than words. Some men shout to be seen. You stay calm. Some chase to be heard. You remain still. You've realized silence is not emptiness. It's strength. Calm doesn't beg. Calm doesn't plead. It just isn't. That unsettles those used to your effort. When you respond with presence instead of pressure, it changes everything. Your calm becomes unfamiliar. She can't read you anymore, and that unpredictability holds power. Your emotions no longer dance to her rhythm. She expected reactions. She receives reflection. In silence, your clarity sharpens. You observe, not absorb. You respond, not react. She begins to feel small jolts of confusion. Why doesn't he seem bothered? Why is he okay without me? And your calm becomes the mirror to her chaos. The loudest voice in the room is often the most unsettled. But the quiet man, the Stoic, remains unmoved and unforgettable. 13. When you withdraw, you create space for truth. Not every silence is a punishment. Some are just clarity in motion. When you step back, you don't dispute, realign. You stop forcing what isn't mutual. You no longer fill the silence with effort. In that gap, truth emerges. Does she miss you, or just miss being chased? Was she ever present, or only when convenient? Your absence brings out her honesty, not in her words but in her actions. Does she reach out? Does she care? Or does she move on? Withdrawal reveals loyalty. It exposes where the energy truly flows. You're not withdrawing to cause regret. You're stepping back to see what stays without being held. That's the essence of discernment. And once you see the truth, you don't unsee it. A Stoic man doesn't fear space. He welcomes it, for it always tells the truth. 14. She tests the silence before she feels it. At first, she'll think it's a phase. She may wait, thinking you'll return to old patterns. She might throw a casual message to see if you respond. That message isn't connection, it's curiosity. She's testing the silence, but your response has changed. You don't answer like before. You're composed, not cold but detached. And that energy, creates contrast. She begins to sense you've shifted internally. You're no longer the man hoping for her approval. You're now the man living in self-alignment. She may feel discomfort, but it's not your burden. You gave consistency. Now you give distance, not to provoke her, but to protect yourself. She tests, yes, but it's only when the tests stop working that the silence becomes real. And when it becomes real, she either grows or fades. You're not there to decide which, only to observe. 15. Presence without pursuit changes the dynamic. You don't disappear. You'll become selective. You're still present, but no longer pursuing. And that changes how she experiences you. You respond, but not with eagerness. You engage, but without chasing. That subtle difference creates respect. You are no longer driven by fear of loss. You are grounded in self-worth. You don't seek to impress. You seek alignment. Your energy now reflects boundaries, and boundaries build value. She feels the shift in dynamic, not because you say it, but because you live it. You used to revolve around her, now you revolve around purpose. That magnetism isn't loud, it's quiet strength. You're still here, but only for what aligns. And that presence, without pursuit, creates powerful attraction, not forced, earned. 16. The more you say nothing, the more she feels everything. Sometimes the most powerful message is delivered through silence. When you stop explaining yourself, stop defending your worth, and stop filling the air with unnecessary words, something begins to shift. She begins to feel everything you're no longer saying. Your silence becomes a mirror, reflecting her own behavior back to her. The calls you didn't return, the messages you no longer send, each one becomes more meaningful than 1,000 explanations. You are not being cold, you are simply done overextending. In the stillness of your response, she is left alone with her own thoughts, her own patterns, her own accountability. And while she may not admit it, she feels your absence more than she ever acknowledged your presence. You were always there until you weren't. And now, in your quiet, she starts to hear the truth she used to ignore. She wonders why it feels heavier now, why the silence feels different. It's because it's not meant to punish hurts, meant to protect your peace. You've matured past the point of needing to explain your boundaries. You simply live them, and in doing so, you allow her to feel, to notice, and to realize. Not by pressure, not by persuasion, but by contrast. Because sometimes, when a man says nothing at all, a woman finally hears what he truly meant. 17. You don't owe her your energy anymore. There comes a point when you understand the cost of constantly giving. You realize that energy is not that not everyone deserves access to your peace. You used to give her your time, your thoughts, your patience freely. You did so because you cared, because you hoped, because you believed. But then something changed. You recognized that giving must be mutual, that effort without reciprocity is depletion. And in that moment, you took a step back, not out of anger, but out of wisdom. You began protecting your emotional resources. You stopped offering what was never appreciated, and in doing so, you started to heal. You no longer owe her your attention, your explanations, or your loyalty if they are not returned. That's not bitterness, it's self-respect. She may wonder why you've changed. She may even call it selfish. But the truth is simple. You can't pour from an empty cup, and she no longer gets to be the priority if you were never hers. You owe your energy to growth, to purpose, to peace, not to chasing clarity from someone who didn't value your presence when it was available. Your withdrawal is not a loss, it's a lesson. One that says, I will give but only where it's deserved. 18. Emotional distance isn't cruelty, it's clarity. When a man creates emotional distance, it is often misunderstood. It is labeled as cold, heartless, or indifferent. But in truth, emotional distance is not cruelty, it's clarity. It is the understanding that staying emotionally entangled in inconsistency only prolongs your confusion. And so, you step back, not because you've stopped caring, but because you've started seeing clearly. You recognize the patterns, the hot and cold, the inconsistency, the emotional games, and instead of reacting, you detach. You give yourself space to think, to breathe, to evaluate, and in that space, you gain perspective. Emotional distance is how you regain control over your own mind. You no longer react impulsively to every message or silence. You are no longer bound by the need for emotional validation. You understand that peace is more important than temporary attention. And the woman who once drew you in with chaos now finds you unmoved, not out of pride, but out of inner discipline. You are no longer playing a part in a drama. You've chosen clarity over confusion, stillness over storms. And from that space, you can finally ask the right questions. Is this connection building me or draining me? Is this love or attachment? Emotional distance allows the answers to rise. And with those answers, your direction becomes clear. 19. The man who stops explaining himself is dangerous. A man becomes truly powerful when he stops explaining his worth, when he no longer argues about what he deserves, when he refuses to justify his silence. This man becomes different, not bitter, not loud, but grounded, because he has nothing left to prove. He's not seeking to be understood by someone who refuses to listen. He's not chasing validation from someone who only values his presence in moments of convenience. He has turned inward. He has made peace with being misunderstood. And that kind of peace is rare. When she says, "You've changed," he doesn't defend. He simply nods, because yes, he has changed. He no longer explains why he needs space. He takes it. He doesn't ask to be respected. He embodies it, and in this quiet strength, he becomes unpredictable. Not reckless, but unreadable. She can no longer manipulate his emotions with silence or bait him with drama. He has risen above the noise, and in doing so, he becomes the kind of man who is no longer emotionally accessible on command. That distance, that discipline, it's not a punishment, it's transformation. And once a man becomes this clear, this steady, becomes unforgettable. 20. You become magnetic when you focus on yourself ironically. The more you shift your focus inward, the more you begin to attract everything that once ran from you. Not because you chase, but because you no longer need. You stop trying to win her over. You stop trying to be chosen. Instead, you choose yourself. You build in silence. You heal in solitude. You work on your mind, your body, your purpose. And in that stillness, something powerful happens. You become magnetic, not in a loud, attention-seeking way, but in a quiet, stable, focused energy that can't be ignored. She sees the shift. You're no longer texting just to feel close. You're no longer waiting for her to see your worth. You've already seen it in yourself. That confidence is calm. That detachment is not rejection, it's maturity. And now, when she looks at you, she sees a man she cannot control. A man who's become too grounded to be swayed by temporary feelings. That's where your power lies. In not needing her to come back. In being at peace whether she does or doesn't. Because you're no longer chasing outcomes, you're building the man you were meant to be. And that man, he attracts everything real without lifting a finger.